Hi there, and welcome to Fuzzy on the Details. My name is Fuzzy, and if you're interested in the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game, you've come to the right place. And if you're new here, welcome. This channel is 100% dedicated to MMRPG, and today we've got a special episode, kind of a crossover event, talking about the new Marvel Rivals game supplement that's just been made available as a free download on marvel.com/RPG. The supplement is chock full of Marvel Rivals related content, and we're going to be breaking it all down. The new character profiles, the battle map, and the new play mode. Additionally, I've got a couple of insights to share from the Marvel RPG design team, who were gracious enough to answer a few questions as I prepared this video. So if you're not familiar, Marvel Rivals is a first-person shooter similar to Overwatch. And it's got some pretty deep lore, which starts with Dr. Doom battling with his 2099 counterpart, which resulted in this cataclysmic event called the Time Stream Entanglement. Kind of like a twist on Battleworld. Basically, there's all these different factions with heroes and villains that come from different chronoverses. So what does this mean for the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game? Well, it's an opportunity to revisit some familiar heroes and give them some fresh new profiles. They're coming in at different strength levels than we've previously seen in the game, and it also introduces some new abilities called team-up powers. So let's dig into these team-up powers, and first off, I wanted to thank Marvel for answering a few questions I had about them, and I think it's really going to help clarify the rules for the community. Let's take a look at the format for each one of these powers, and you'll probably notice something familiar. It's very similar to the team maneuvers from the core rulebook. Each team-up power has a type: offensive, rally, or defensive, and each has a level, just like the maneuvers do in the core rulebook. In the RPG game, team maneuvers are decided upon before an adventure starts, and each level has a focus cost, as you can see in the chart here. So does that mean that each of the team-up powers, which are all level 1, cost 5 focus per participating hero? Absolutely it does, and that's been confirmed by Marvel. But does it mean that the team-up powers each only last 1 round like the team maneuvers do? Nope, the team-up powers are a little less restrictive, and many explicitly last the whole combat, like the friendly shoulder team-up power you see here. So, these function kind of within the same general framework as team maneuvers, but they do have differences that are unique to these Rivals profiles, which are designed to be played with the new Domination game mode. There's nothing, however, preventing you from having a regular team maneuver and a team-up while playing in the Domination mode. And once again, that's something that Marvel confirmed directly for me. Big shout out to the ever-helpful Amir. Thanks, man. Now, if you're like me, seeing these team-ups really gets the creative juices flowing. The possibilities for homebrew here are endless. You can do Hawkeye and Black Widow, Misty Knight and Colleen Wing, Luke Cage and Iron Fist, the list goes on and on. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in seeing a separate video in the new year talking all about additional team-ups for MMRPG. And heck, if you've got ideas for some, throw them in the comments. Alright, let's dig into the new character profiles. One thing worth mentioning is that in Rivals, each character can be one of 3 character types. A Vanguard, which is kind of like a tank, a Duelist, which is DPS, or a Strategist, which is kind of like support or healing. And you will probably not be surprised to hear that the Hulks are Vanguards, or tanks. First off, I really like that these 2 Hulks are of different power levels. If you're a longtime listener, you know that I believe there are many different ways to build the character, especially one that's been around as long as the Hulk. This is something the game has already established with the X-Men 97 builds, where we had a Magneto knocked down from a 6 to a 5, Storm upgraded from a 4 to a 5, and Sunspot knocked down from a 5 to a 3. Each of these characters has got a different feel, and it's really good variety for the game. I think it's great. But why would the Hulk be knocked down all the way to rank 3? Well, because all of the other heroes are rank 3, and this is a video game. It's important for all the character options to be somewhat balanced. It's as simple as that. No reason the same thing can't be true in your tabletop game. So if you're playing in a Defenders game, let's say, and the other players are rank 3 Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, and you want to play Daredevil, but oh boo-hoo, he's only rank 2, just make a rank 3 Daredevil and call him Daredevil parentheses Defenders or Shadowlands Daredevil to distinguish him from the rank 2 build that is in the core rulebook. I really think that this approach is healthy for the game, and I'm thrilled to see Marvel doing more of that here. I hope we see a lot more of that to come, and If you've seen the character list for the Spider-Verse expansion, you can see they're doing a lot of that too. We've got a couple characters there that are parentheses early days. All of this, I think, is really positive. Looking at these two builds, there's one other thing that comes to mind. One has the heroic tag in Karma, and the other does not. And honestly, that's not something I think about very often when I'm making alternate builds. I could certainly see a character like, let's say, Elektra getting the heroic tag with a build that's based off of her more recent comics where she's consciously trying to act more like Daredevil, even wearing his outfit. I also really like the note here on the character profile. Once per combat, Bruce Banner, and we'll take a look at him next, can turn into Hero Hulk, and Hero Hulk can then turn into Monster Hulk, and then if he's reduced to 0 health, he goes back to the Hero Hulk with full hit points and then back to Bruce Banner. This might seem like super OP, but in Rivals, everyone respawns for free, and they do so as well in this Domination game mode. So the real benefit here is that you don't have to go all the way back to the starting area. Yes, you'll lose your movement for a turn to do the change, but you get to stay where you are, which, as we'll see when we discuss the new game mode, is very advantageous, especially if you're in the mission area. And one note here, and this is something else I confirmed with Marvel, if you take a look at Monster Hulk's initiative, it should be a +5 and not a +3. Initiative always equals your vigilance. And if you've played Marvel Rivals, you might recognize the Gamma Boost team-up power here is tied to an ability in the game where Iron Man's Unibeam power can go into this Gamma Overdrive, doing more damage. Now let's take a look at Bruce Banner. First off, we've never had a Bruce Banner in the game, or a Tony Stark for that matter, or any other unpowered alter ego of a main hero. So this alone is new. And two things stand out to me. First, in this case, the Bruce Banner isn't like this foundation that the Hulk is built upon. Look at his logic, it drops 5 points when he's turning into the Hero Hulk. This is a completely different build. You would have a very different character sheet for this incarnation of the character versus the Hulk. Although, if you'll notice, his occupation and his origin remain the same. So this might be something you keep in mind if you want to build, say, a Tony Stark or another character that turns from one version of a character into another. It's not the same approach that the game does, say, with a werewolf or a vampire. Looking at Groot and Rocket here, we can see that once again they are a lower rank than they are in the core rulebook. And once again, I really like having the flexibility of these characters at multiple ranks, especially having them at lower ranks. One reason for that, if you had a couple of first-time MMRPG players that wanted to play Rocket in group, I might steer them towards these builds versus the rank 4 builds, if for no other reason that they still capture the concept of these characters, but they have fewer powers to keep straight, so it's a little bit more of a streamlined experience. Once they get the hang of the game, you can introduce them to the higher rank profiles. As we go through these character profiles, I'm not going to point out absolutely every difference. I'm only going to point out what I think are the major ones. So for Groot, his stats are pretty similar. All of them are within 1 point of his CRB build, except for agility. In this build, he loses some of his plasticity powers, but he gains a lot more in the way of elemental control, which again is a different way to build him, but I think it still works. This Rocket is very different from his CRB counterpart. The biggest ability differences is that melee is 2 points lower, logic is 4 points lower, and his ego is 2 points higher. And this Rocket has power control abilities, plus wall crawling and flight, plus healing powers. And those healing powers will be a clue. He is a strategist in Marvel Rivals, so he's going to be filling much more of a support role on his team. This is a completely different take on him, almost like an entirely new character. And regarding the team-up power, I think it's pretty straightforward. Rocket gets sturdy for the rest of the battle, but note that only Rocket gets any kind of bonus from this ability. Black Panther is a duelist and his melee drops 2. He loses damage reduction. He's not a tank, he's not a vanguard. And he loses his tactics, but he picks up a second iconic weapon, a spear that can be used at range. In a first-person shooter, most characters want to shoot. He's been given hit and run and jump powers that really help with his mobility, which is very important in the Domination game mode. Magik is another character with a very different look, and she's also a duelist like Black Panther. Despite being 2 ranks lower than her X-Men expansion incarnation, her melee score is actually 3 points higher, which I actually love. Her vigilance and ego are significantly lower though. They were 6 and 8 respectively. She loses 2 points of DR for both health and focus, and she trades her omniversal travel abilities for straight-out teleportation, which maybe isn't lore specific, but it's much more streamlined for this skirmish-style play. Her only magic power is Leech Life, but I love the note here that references her Darkchild form, which she instantly transforms into for 2 rounds, granting her the benefit of boost powers, which is a simple but evocative little boost for her. I ran a game for a brand new player once and he wanted to play Magic, and I really didn't want to give him the rank 5 version of Magic. I wish I had this build. It's much more streamlined and it captures everything that makes Magic magic. The team-up power here allows Black Panther to both teleport and heal. Again, anything that grants extra movement in this game mode is going to be very important with these domination rules. Iron Man at rank 3 is coming in at 1 rank lower than his core rulebook incarnation. The only ability score that significantly dips is Logic, which is down to 3 from a 5 in the CRB. And in this game mode, Logic isn't going to do anything for you unless you're a telepath or defending against them, so it's really not that much of a loss. It doesn't impact his offensive capabilities at all. Tony loses his DR, but actually has a higher focus thanks to picking up Battle Ready. And as a duelist, that kind of makes sense. They're not known for their staying power. Supernova is a significant pickup too, as is Bump Power, which he can use on himself. Again, DPS is key for these duelists. Now the team-up power I think is a little weak, only because this particular incarnation of Iron Man has very high focus, so I don't think you'll be using Elemental Burst all that much. This is a pretty fast game mode. You're probably going to want to use your higher focus cost powers as much as possible. You might find yourself using Supernova pretty much every round. Now Loki here gets knocked down 2 ranks, and the big dips are Melee and Logic, both dropping 2, and Ego dropping a whopping 4. He loses all of his magic sorcery, telekinesis, and telepathic powers, replacing them with illusion, and I'm not gonna lie, this almost feels more in line with at least what my thoughts on Loki are. He's got swap powers as well, and swap places, which is really useful to have when you're playing the domination game mode, where it matters where you end your turn. With that power, you almost kinda want Loki to go last on any given turn. Loki in Marvel Rivals is a strategist. Luna Snow, if you weren't aware, is a character that first appears in the Marvel Future Flight game. Her accuracy 2 pairs very well with her 2 elemental powers, both of which rely on agility, and she's yet another character with a bump power. And like she does in Future Flight and in the comics, she's got some healing abilities. There aren't a ton of healers in MMRPG, with the power set only recently introduced in the X-Men expansion, so this instantly makes her a nice addition to the game, whether you're using her in the domination mode or not. And of course, with those healing powers, she is a strategist in the game, the last of the ones we'll be reviewing. Her team-up power with Namor gives him a little boost, as the special effect of the ice element is that it paralyzes a target for 1 round, making it, arguably, one of the most powerful elemental effects. And especially good in a mode like Domination, where you can paralyze someone to prevent them from getting into the mission area, which you need to be in to win points to win the game. Namor here dips a rank compared to his CRB build. His melee drops 3, but his agility actually rises 3 points. This increases his speed, which by the way is not actually reflected in the stats. His run speed should be 6 and his flight speed should be 18. That speed boost is a pretty big deal in the domination game mode. His mighty value drops from 3 to 1 and he loses sturdy. He loses his swim speed and his telepathic communication with fish, which is obviously okay since there really won't be that many opportunities to use these powers in the domination game mode. But that said, I think this is probably the first build I wouldn't actually recommend for play outside of that mode. Again, he just doesn't feel fully realized as Namor without those abilities. Now, he does pick up some additional elemental powers, including some rank 4 ones that he needed surprising power to get. His focus remains 90 though, so you might want to keep an eye on how often you use those higher rank powers. Now Magneto's a little bit of a weird one. In Marvel Rivals, he is a vanguard, like Groot and like the Hulk. So we've got some pretty wild changes here. His 180 health is actually twice that of the 2 versions that are higher ranks, while his focus is way lower. His logic is way down to 0, which again doesn't have any impact on his offensive abilities, but taking his ego down to 3 is a big change. Discipline 2 helps make up for that by increasing his damage multiplier, and we've got another change here where he's got no focus damage reduction. His iconic weapon is a huge change too. This idea of Magneto using a greatsword for melee combat, even if it does have a range of 3 spaces, is quite different. And like other characters we're seeing, he's got surprising power and supernova, but with a focus of only 60, he's really going to be limited as to how many times he can use that. You're probably going to want him on the front lines, soaking up hits and dealing damage with his greatsword. The team-up power with the Scarlet Witch helps Magneto even more in melee by increasing his damage multiplier by 1. Note, his iconic weapon does not grant any increase to his damage multiplier, so the team-up power will take it from a ×3 to a ×4. Speaking of the Scarlet Witch, she is 2 ranks lower than her CRB profile. Her melee, ego, and logic are all 3 points lower than that build. Another big change is that she does not have flight. And obviously she's got a lot less in the way of powers, with only 3 remaining magic ones, but she's added some phasing powers, which is a choice I admit I don't quite understand. But mechanically, Quick Phase helps make up for her defensive spells that she's lost in her build. And finally, Spider-Man. Spidey is a rank lower, but he doesn't have a lot of huge changes. One quick note is that his run speed should be 6, as his agility is 5 or higher. His swing line speed is correct at 18 though. Like the original Spidey build in the CRB, he's all in on the Spider Powers power set. So this build feels very much like a slightly less powerful 616 Spider-Man profile, making this an excellent build for newcomers who want to try the game out, whether you're playing the Domination mode or not. Alright, speaking of the Domination mode, let's get into how that works. It's pretty straightforward. All of the Rivals builds are rank 3, so you take 2 teams of equal size and square off against each other, either with one group of players against the narrator and some NPCs like you would in a regular MMRPG game, or with 2 groups of players playing PvP. Each team starts at their own spawn area at opposite ends of the map, and you roll initiative to see which character goes first, just like you would in a regular combat. You win the game by accumulating points that you get for having more team members than your enemy does in the mission area at the end of each round of combat. The first team to 4 points wins. If a character is defeated, they go back to their spawn area and have to make their way all the way back to the middle of the map, which can be a real drag, so healers can turn the tide of the battle for sure. One of the great things about this mode is you can get right into combat, and it's a pretty quick gameplay experience, making this an ideal introduction to the mechanics of MMRPG for new players, whether they're coming over from Rivals or not. Both the Domination game mode and the map come right from Rivals, and you can see from this image what a faithful representation the map is. There are 2 other modes of the game in Rivals, Convoy and Convergence, with maps tied to each mode. If you're interested in seeing those modes or those maps realized in MMRPG, go to marvel.com/RPG and leave Marvel some feedback and let them know your thoughts. Now these rules are pretty straightforward, so I have 3 things you can do to spice things up a little bit, taken directly from the Rivals game. 1. In Rivals, some terrain can be destroyed. So if you're playing the Domination mode with a narrator, this is something they can adjudicate on the fly, or if you're playing without one, you can decide before the game starts which bits of terrain on the map may be destroyed and how much damage it takes to do so. You can keep things simple and say each space has 30 health, so abilities like Supernova can really wipe out cover in an area. Rivals also has health packs scattered across the map. You can sprinkle some of these on your map as well, evenly, so each team has access. These health packs can give a character a free recovery check as though they had spent a point of karma to heal. And finally, there are bounce pads in the Rivals game, so you can add a few of those to strategic areas as well. Using them could help an attacker get line of sight on a character hiding behind some terrain. And you can basically treat this as a free temporary use of the jump power once you've moved into the space with the pad. Maybe a jump 2. Let's talk a little bit about tactics, and I'll broaden my advice here in case you wanted to use other character profiles in this mode. Number 1, think about how your tactics will translate from a real-time experience from Rivals to a turn-based one in MMRPG. Remember that points are accumulated at the end of each round, so depending on your powers, there are times you might want to go early and times you might want to go a little later. For example, paralyzing or stunning a foe is very effective in this mode, and you'll want to use these powers before an enemy moves into the central mission area. If an enemy is already in the mission area, you definitely don't want to web them in place there. So, a character like Spider-Man can be very powerful with his webbing, but you want to make sure you use those powers before the enemies get to the middle of the map. Heck, if you're playing Spider-Man, you might want to use some karma to reroll your initiative to make sure you go at the right time. Speed is obviously really important. You want to get to the middle of the map as quickly as you can, so teleporting even more so. Teleporting other could actually be a lot of fun as well, to drag enemies as far away from the mission area as possible. If you're thinking of modifying other MMRPG characters for this mode, you might want to restrict certain abilities like that, because a character like Nightcrawler could be totally OP. Also, delaying your turn to go last might be beneficial, especially if you have an ability like Quick Toss that can actually maneuver someone out of the mission area. Remember that the immovable power can prevent this. Hulk happens to have both of those powers. And finally, don't forget that you can do a double move. That might be the most common tactic in the very first round of combat in the Domination mode. Now let's talk a little bit about this beautiful map and give a huge shout out to the cartographer Brian Patterson. If you didn't know, Brian has done the maps for Enter Hydra, Revenge of the Super Skrull, Murder World That Time Forgot, Cataclysm of Kang, Deadpool Roleplays the Marvel Universe, the X-Men expansion, the free Excalibur chapter available on Marvel.com, and the upcoming Spider-Verse expansion. Wow. Brian has amazing attention to detail in his maps. The map on the right here is from the Deadpool adventure, and it's a great example of that. The map is representing a Merc convention, and if we zoom in on Area 1 here, we can see that Deadpool's TV has got game controllers plugged into it, while the other organizations are presumably showing recruitment videos on their TVs. It really communicates how seriously Deadpool takes his job. And I love little details like Aim's guns here in these cases. What are they? What do they shoot? It turned that little detail into a whole plot hook. And Brian is great at conveying tone in his maps as well. The "Hail Us" text in the Hydra booth is just hilarious and instantly tells you what kind of encounters you're in for. Zooming in on the other map, which comes from the Murder World adventure, I love details like the anchor rolled up on the lower side of the boat. If you were playing a character like Polaris in this adventure, you could have a real cinematic moment with your magnetism powers using that little detail. Also, you've got these little crates and carts around the map that can be used as cover or thrown. And these loading cranes can be climbed, knocked over, or used as a point from which a character like Spider-Man or Daredevil could swing from. And again, Brian pays attention to tone on this map. There's great contrast between the shadows and the light sources, and characters could be inspired to sneak around, avoiding the lighter areas to try and gain surprise. Basically, all of these little details can lead to creative moments around your table and really enhance the experience of the game. If you'd like to see more of Brian Patterson's art and some free stuff, go to brianeffenpatterson.com. But don't just go there for the awesome art, the maps, and the webcomic. Go to brianeffenpatterson.com, because if you go to brianeffenpatterson.com, you get to say, I went to brianeffenpatterson.com, and it's just super satisfying to say that URL out loud. Oh, and while you're there, check out his Patreon. Even if you're not in a position to contribute, he's got a free level and he's got some free maps there as well. Links are in the description. Brian, thank you so much for all that you do for MMRPG. I would love to know in the comments if there's anything else from Marvel Rivals that you'd like to see reflected in the MMRPG rules. If you're a Rivals fan and this is the first MMRPG video you've seen, this community is amazing. Please feel free to ask any questions you want in the comments, or check out my how to play videos that I've linked in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great day.